Hello? Hello?
He's a white male, sort of light-colored hair, sort of plump. He's behind me now, and I tried to slow down so he could pass me and I could read his license plate.
Ma'am, don't hang up, okay?
I'm not.
Hello? Hello?
But I think that he saw me look at him, and I'm not trying to be overdramatic here, but he's going even slower now. And is he pulling over? No, something's going on because he's even going even slower now.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark. Paradise After Dark is a bi-weekly podcast covering true crime,
unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
urban legends, and the dark side of the Sunshine State.
But first, if you'd like to support the show, please subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Paradise After Dark podcast.
I wonder if our listeners know that on Patreon, we don't just have one bonus show. We have two.
Yeah, and we have a whole slew of shows, too.
We have our bonus off-topic and uncut, and then we also have our bonus vacation edition where we leave Florida and cover a case somewhere else.
Yeah, some of those are quite interesting.
So there's a lot of bonus stuff on Patreon, and you also get discounts on our merchandise and much, much more. So it's probably a good idea to go ahead and sign up for that.
Yeah, uncut. That's just us.
Yes. Off topic and uncut is when we just run our mouth. Yep. To be honest, we just run our mouth about whatever.
Yeah, that's where Ken gets lost in his own brain.
So if you have a question, a Florida case suggestion, or you'd just like to chat, please email us at paradiseafterdarkpodcast@gmail.com.
And don't forget, we will be at CrimeCon UK.
CrimeCon UK. That is Saturday, June 12th through Sunday, June 13th, 2021 in London, England. Get your tickets now and use code Paradise21 for 10% off.
I can't wait until we actually get to 21.
Oh, I know.
20 has got to go.
Yes, I agree.
So, Lauren, tonight we're discussing a case which a lot of people, I think, are going to find very, very frustrating. You're going to kind of be up and down on this one, and you're going to have some frustrating at people that are supposed to help.
Well, and not only that, it's just, I know I've mentioned this before on the show, but my biggest fear, like the reason I'm like Golden State Killer or Richard Ramirez or any of those is the complete random attacks. Like just completely, there's no connection between perpetrator and victim. It's just completely random. And for some reason, that just scares the crap out of me.
Well, as it should.
And that's what we have here tonight. That's what happened in this case we're talking about tonight. So I'm just going to dive in. We're talking about a young woman named Denise Amber Lee. She was a 21-year-old loving mother of two boys whose husband, Nathan, worked hard so that Denise could stay home and raise her children. So she's a stay-at-home mom. She was born Denise Amber Goff on August 6, 1986 in Inglewood, Florida, to Sergeant Rick Goff of the Sheriff's Office in Charlotte County and to Sue Goff. She met her future husband, Nate Lee, in high school. Nate was a jock and Denise was a bookworm. Nate told Dateline in an episode titled The Detective's Daughter, one of the main things about Denise was she was pretty quiet. She wasn't a very outgoing person. She actually talked to me first, and I always thought that was the most ironic thing ever because, you know, as quiet as she was, and people find out that she's the one that approached me. 3 weeks after their first date, it was Valentine's Day, and Nate gave Denise a ring with a small heart on it, and it was a ring that she would never take off.
Yeah, Nate said in that same interview that the ring was only like $40, but she really cherished it and literally never took it off.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after they graduated high school, the couple married. They had 2 children, Noah and Adam. And the couple didn't have much money, so they rented a home in a semi-rural area of Northport. It was supposed to be this like big subdivision, but due to the housing crisis back in 2008, there were hardly any houses built. So I guess the builder started building a bunch of houses.
Right, yeah.
But kind of stopped halfway through. So some of these, there were houses there, they were empty.
Mm-hmm.
And Denise's father, Rick Goff, was not very thrilled about the location. He felt it was too desolate and too isolated for him, which I can understand. I mean, it's a young family.
Right.
He's a deputy. He knows, kind of what happens in these areas. So, but Denise and Nate were happy, and it was affordable, and that's just what they did. That's where they lived.
So January 17th, 2008 started out like any other day. It was drizzly outside when Nate left for his job as an electric meter reader. Denise was cutting her son Noah's hair on the back porch of their Northport home. Now, Nate told Dateline that he spoke to his wife from his cell phone in the early afternoon. It was only about a 5-minute conversation, and he said they just talked about what they normally talk about. He remembered asking her that morning to make sure to open the windows so they can turn the air off and save money, and she said that she already had. He didn't get a chance to call her again until he was on his way home, but Denise didn't answer, and that was unlike her. He ended up calling her 8 times in the 25 minutes it took him to get home. He knew something was wrong.
I can imagine if you're trying to contact, especially if she's at home. She's a stay-at-home mom. If she don't answer after 8 calls,
yeah,
it's likely something's wrong. Now, when Nate got home, all of the windows in the house were closed, which was different than what she had said earlier, that she was going to open the windows.
She said she had already opened all the windows.
Yeah, I mean, this was strange based on the conversation that they had earlier. And he found his 2 young sons in the crib together, but Denise was nowhere to be found. Now, at this point, you can just imagine the panic in this guy's body and his brain. What's going on with him right now?
Right.
Now, Denise's cell phone and keys were lying on the chair. Obviously, this is going to ramp that up as well. And the windows were all closed but not latched, as if someone had closed them in a hurry. It was within 10 minutes that I really knew that something was not right, Nathan told ABC News. He sensed his wife was possibly in serious trouble, so Nate called 911. The 911 call was made at exactly 3:29 p.m., and this would be the first of many that were made that day related to Denise's disappearance. Now, Nate called Denise's father, Rick, and Rick was a 25-year veteran of the sheriff's office in the neighboring county of Charlotte. And Rick said that he knew immediately that something bad had happened because he had called, I guess, Denise earlier in the day and invited the kids over for dinner, them and the grandkids over for dinner. So he thought that this was just a call saying, hey, we're coming over tonight or whatever.
Right.
So he thought it was odd that Nate was calling him. And so he kind of thought, well, as soon as Nate called him, he knew within seconds that something was not right. He knew his daughter, and he knew that she would never take off and leave the children. He also knew how typical missing person cases are handled, which makes sense. You're a sheriff. So he reached out to his own department and asked for help, and they offered him anything he needed. Then he rushed to Northport to meet up with Nate.
Okay, so we really need to clarify here. Nate and Denise live in Northport, Florida, which is in Sarasota County.
Yeah, this is important.
And Denise's father, Rick, is a 25-year veteran of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Now, that is just south of Sarasota County, so these are completely different counties. Now, at this point, as soon as he figures out that his daughter's missing, he reached out to his own department, which was Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, and they offered him anything he needed. Keep that in mind as we go.
Yep.
So when the police got to the Lee residence, they started knocking on doors and got their first big tip of the day from a neighbor. A woman named Jennifer Eckerd was staying with relatives in the house next door to the Lees. She saw a green Camaro drive slowly past their homes several times. She told the police she saw a white male sitting in the dark green Camaro parked in Denise's driveway at around 2:30 p.m. I came outside and he sat there, I'd say for a good 15 minutes. So I went back inside and then about 10 minutes later he left, Eckerd told Dateline. She didn't hear any screaming or anything out of the ordinary, but police put out a bolo for the car and driver, and a missing persons bulletin went out to Northport, to Sarasota and Charlotte counties.
So all 3 counties got the bolo.
Well, Northport is a city.
Yeah.
Sarasota and Charlotte are counties.
Oh, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. 3 different departments, rather.
Right. About an hour later, at 6:14 p.m., a 911 call went to the Sarasota County Dispatch from a woman. We'll play that audio of that call now. Be prepared, though. This may be hard to listen to, and some parts are actually hard to understand, so we'll explain more after the clip.
911. Hello? 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 Help me. What's the address? What's the address that you're at? Hello? What is the address that you're at? Hello, ma'am? Where are we going? I got to go up to the mountain now. I'm going around where? That's the stop. Can you see it? That's 4 streets. No, 5 streets over from your house. I couldn't. What's your name, ma'am? Hello? What's your name? My name is Denise. I'm your beautiful husband, and I just want to see my kids again. Your name's Denise? I'm sorry. Thank you, too, for the beat of the house. God, please protect me. Are you on I-75? Where are we? Please. Where are you at? Can you tell if you're on I-75? I don't know where your phone is. I'm sorry. You just tell me where we are. Are you blindfolded if you have pressed the button? I don't have your phone. Do you know this guy? I don't know. I'm sorry. Denise, do you know this guy? She might have the phone laid down and not hear a thing I'm saying, too. She keeps saying on the phone. I don't know where it is. Maybe if I could see it, help me find it. No, sir. Denise? How long have you been gone from your house? How long? Do you know how long you've been gone from your house? your last name? Lee. Lee? Yeah. Do you know what street? Your name's Denise Lee? Can you tell at all what street you're on? No. Do you know this guy that's with you? No. You don't know him from anywhere? No. What's your address? What's your home address, do you know? Can you see, or do you have a blindfold on? Can they turn off the radio or turn it down? I can't hear you. It's too loud. Are you going to help me? Are you going to let me out now?
So 2 dispatchers tried to figure out what was happening to the woman. It was Denise. She had been abducted and had gotten a hold of her captor's cell phone. She was trying to make it sound like she was speaking to her abductor while also letting the 911 dispatch know what was happening. It was very confusing. And I actually have the transcript of this call, which I'm going to post on our social media sites. So if you want to go actually read the transcript, go check out our Facebook or Instagram. Now, during the brief 911 call, the dispatcher told Denise she couldn't hear her because the radio was too loud. Denise calmly asks her abductor to turn down the radio. Denise said, "Can you turn the radio down so you can listen to what I have to say?" She was smart. I couldn't have done what she did, her father told the Northport Sun. I think if she had called me, I would have made things worse. She didn't know the man or where she was. She was just trying to get away from him. She gave information like the make of the vehicle she was in, a green Camaro, which confirmed the tip police got earlier in the day, and the fact that her kidnapper was a stranger to her. The man figured out Denise had his cell phone. He abruptly ended the call, but not before threatening her.
Yeah, the worst part about this 911 call to me, in listening to it, and I've listened to it several times, you can hear her, you can sense the fear, but her calmness and how she was like wise in the way of how to handle her abductor. And not, obviously she's been taken, but I mean the way that she was able to make the 911 call, make it seem so it was not obvious that she was
right. She was
on
very
the phone,
smart.
But yet you could definitely sense the fear. I mean, you can sense the fear in her voice. Mm-hmm. And I guess that was the hardest part for me, was to listen to that multiple times to really hear it, because it is kind of faded in and out, and sometimes you can't really make out what's being said. I tried to listen to what he was saying, and because you could hear him talking, it was just a very frustrating 911 call. That's what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Was how frustrating that could be.
Right.
Well, after this 911 call, the authorities brought Rick Goff in to see if he could identify the voice as his daughter, which he did. So obviously you got to verify this. Now, Rick began pleading for help from everyone he could think of, including the media. Always turn to the media, folks. Always. Now, because of Rick's connections in law enforcement, everyone from Highway Patrol, the Marshal Service, everyone was on the lookout for Denise. Now, Denise's family felt confident that they could find Denise, and they assumed that they could track the cell phone that she called from. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. Keep in mind, folks, this was 2008, and this is still a time that's prior to everyone having smartphones. Right. In 2008, I had a Pantech slide-out flip phone, which I could get internet from, but only on Wi-Fi. So, right. It's a lot of times when people say, "Oh, cell phones, you just GPS track it, you ping it." Well, it's not that simple in 2008. The kidnapper's phone was one of those inexpensive throwaway phones. It was not equipped with the kind of GPS tracking that police can usually lock into location of the whereabouts of the cell phone. Now, the only thing police were able to get were pings from nearby cell phone towers, and that meant that was somewhere in the area. Cell phone pings. Everyone wants to ping a cell phone.
Right.
Now, but from the phone number, they were able to identify the owner of the phone as a man named Michael Lee King.
So the family had absolutely no idea who Michael King was. Nate tried to rack his brain, but could confidently say that neither he nor his wife knew a person by that name, making this abduction completely random, which, as I said earlier, is the scariest kind of abduction. It's rare. It's the most rare type of... A stranger abduction is the most rare type of abduction, but for me, that's one thing that just terrifies me. That's the stuff of nightmares.
And spoiler alert, this is legitimately a random.
Yes.
That we're not gonna hold back and be like, oh, by the way, no, this is random.
Yep.
And like Lauren said, that's the scariest because it's just somebody snapped and that's the way it went, I guess.
Well, and then one thing about this case that I never was able to get a grasp on is had he seen her before? Now, he was definitely a stranger to her, to Denise. Definitely a stranger. She did not know him. Her family didn't know him. But it was never put out there, or he never admitted if he had seen her before. Maybe he had stalked her.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the thought.
So,
well, in this community, remember, it was, I don't want to say it's desolate. There were people that lived there, but it wasn't, there was a lot of houses, but very few people.
Right, exactly.
So you're right. I mean, it's possible. Maybe he drove by and saw her one day and was like, oh.
Right. So, I mean, he may have seen her before or followed her or stalked her.
Yeah.
We don't know. But it's still a stranger abduction, which is pretty rare, but also terrifying.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. We don't normally agree on everything. Now, a short time later, and this was like it was exactly 6:23 p.m., another 911 call comes in to the Northport Police Department. This is a teenager, Sabrina Muxlow. Now, she's the daughter of the suspected kidnapper's cousin. That's Michael King's cousin's daughter. Now, she calls in with a disturbing story she had just heard from her father. She said her dad asked her to call 911 after his cousin, Mikey King, borrowed a shovel and a gas tank. So she said a girl was tied up, got out of the car, but King put her back in the car and left. Think about that. Pulled in the driveway.
There's a girl tied up in the back of his car.
She gets out, and they get back in the car and they leave. So the 911...
They didn't get back in the car. He shoved her back in the car.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying, but they got back in the car. So the 911 operator asked, well, what was he driving? And she said a green Camaro. And Sabrina told the operator her father wanted to remain anonymous, but she gave the police the street where he lived, of course, and this street was just 4 miles from Denise's home. So they're not very far just yet.
So we would later learn that while Michael King was out of the car borrowing a shovel and a gas can, this is when Denise was able to get a hold of his cell phone and make the 911 call. In her first media interview, Sabrina Muxlow told ABC News that she knew calling 911 was the right thing to do. It's common sense. She needed help. She was yelling help. If somebody needs help, then you get them help. You don't stop and think about it, Muxlow said.
Now, how scary is Michael King that he pulls up and all this happens and his own cousin, I mean, you're borrowing a shovel and a gas can and you allow this man to put this girl back in the car that you see is legitimately tied and you don't do shit.
And his cousin wouldn't even call 911. His cousin had his daughter call 911.
So, I mean, obviously they know that obviously maybe he's a loose cannon. Maybe was he a big guy? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to rack my brain as to why it is this guy did nothing.
At 6:30 p.m., another 911 call came in from a woman named Jane Kowalski. We'll play that call for you now.
Is emergency?
Well, I'm on 41 going south, and I'm going to do a cross street right now. I'm on Chamberlain. I just crossed Chamberlain. I'm on 41 going south. And I was at a stoplight, and a man pulled up next to me, and there was a child screaming in the car. Not a happy...
What kind of vehicle was he in?
It's a blue Camaro, in the 90s or early 2000s or something.
Okay, with a baby or...
No, it was a child. It was
About
more than
how old?
You know what? It's dark, and I turn to look at him, and he's a white male, sort of light-colored hair, sort of plump. He's behind me now, and I tried to slow down so he could pass me and I could read his license plate.
Okay, ma'am, don't hang up, okay?
I'm not. Okay.
Okay. Where are you now? 41 South?
Okay. I'm going to pass across the street, and I believe he's still behind me. I'm at Jinx Drive. I'm just crossing it. I'm going very slow, like 35 miles an hour on 41.
And he's behind you?
I believe he's behind me. He has not passed me, and he's going slower than I am, which is not right because we're holding up traffic and stuff. But I think that he saw me look at him, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic here, but he's going even slower now. And is he pulling over? No, something's going on because he's even going even slower now.
Okay.
But he's right behind me, and I don't know if the kid was. I don't know.
Maybe your name.
Okay, my name's Jane. Okay, he's pulling over to the other lane now. Jane Kowalski, Kowalski.
And give me your cell phone number in case I lose you.
813-205. Okay, he's going to turn. 205-4100. Oh shit! And he's going to turn left on Toledo Blade. He's turning left right now. And I'm in the other lane. And
you're going southbound, and he's turning left onto the Toledo Blade.
Right, and it's like a blue. I want to say like a Camaro type of car, white male, kid, and there's a kid in the back seat, and they kept banging on the window.
Went left on Toledo Blade. About how old is this child? Can you tell me?
I did see the child. I'd say less than 10, definitely not an infant, old enough to bang on the window.
Okay, 7 to 10?
I don't know, 5 to 10. Okay, now it's green, and the green arrows, and he's going now.
He's turning left on Toledo Blade.
Yeah. Do you want me to turn? Try to follow him, or?
Okay. Does he want her to follow him? Okay. Can you turn?
He just turned on Toledo Blade. I don't know if I can catch up. There's a bunch of traffic, and I can't get over. Oh boy.
There's a child in the car, someplace between 5 and 10. And it was banging on the window.
And screaming.
And crying.
And screaming. Like screaming.
Okay.
And not a happy scream, like, get me out of here scream.
Left on Toledo Blade. And you said it's a blue Camaro?
Blue or black, very dark. He's a white male. And I want to say sort of light-colored hair, maybe a little in the face. I don't think obese, but I'm way past there now. For me to go catch him, I don't know if I'd ever be able to go back. I mean, I would never stop him. I'm not going to put myself at risk. But,
okay, and I've got your phone number?
813-205.
205. And your first name again?
It's Jane Kowalski, Kowalski. I mean, I hope they weren't just playing around. To me, it sounded like the kid was frightened and panicky, and I don't know. But instead of taking a chance, I just wanted to make sure I called it in. I'd feel terrible if something would have ever...
No, I'm very glad you did, ma'am. That's exactly what you should do. Okay, well, you lost him, and thank you now, and we really appreciate you calling us.
Okay, can someone follow up with me? I mean,
wait, hold on, ma'am.
Okay.
What? Yes. Okay, hang on, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, the vehicle turned left on Toledo Blade off of 41 southbound. She is no longer with the vehicle. The vehicle had a white male driver, blue or black Camaro. Male had light hair, and there was a child screaming in the car.
And banging on the window.
Okay.
And banging on the window,
on,
like
ma'am.
flat. Okay.
I've got everybody hollering at me, and just 1 second. I may need you to pull over, so just bear with me.
That's fine. Oh, okay. I'm going to just pull over now. Let me get over.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, I'm glad you called in.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't know if there's an Amber Alert out or something like that, but
Bear with me. And where are you pulling over?
I just pulled over into the Toys R Us.
Okay, at the Town Center Mall?
Town Center Mall, yeah.
Okay, that's excellent.
I'm from Tampa. I'm going down to Fort Myers to visit my sister. I don't even know where I am, actually, but okay.
You're going where?
I'm going down to Fort Myers to visit my grandmother and my sister. So there's a Chili's there, and there's a Toys R Us.
Exactly what you are. Tell me what kind of car you're in.
It's a silver Mercedes 380 SL.
Okay. If you just sit there. And your doors are locked, right?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
No, I mean, sit in the car. I always have my doors locked.
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea, actually.
The car.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Kirby, do they want to make contact with her? She's pulled over. Hang on, bear with me here. One south left. Yeah, he'd be heading to the interstate. I appreciate you holding on, Jane.
No problem. Well, I hope it turns out to be nothing, really. But, I mean, I would never...
She's pulled over in the Toys R Us parking lot. Do they want contact with her? I have all that. I gave it to you. Okay, I'm asking you if they want contact with her. Yes? Okay. Jane, we have your phone number. If we need you, we'll call you back. You'll be on that cell phone number if we need you, right?
Absolutely, and don't hesitate. I'll give you whatever information I can give you.
Okay, and we really appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, okay. Well, God, I hope... Man, oh, man. Okay.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, thank you.
Drive careful.
Oh, I shall. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
So obviously, Jane had mistaken Denise for a child, but she was right about believing it was an abduction. And she unfortunately got the color of the car wrong, but her description of the driver was correct. Making things even trickier, Jane was driving on US 41, a road that goes north to south, south to north, all along Florida's west coast. When she made the call, she was just beyond the Sarasota County line, so it was routed to a different 911 call center in Charlotte County.
Yeah, and she was, at one point, she got in front of him, which made it really tough to kind of follow him.
Right.
So
several BOLOs were issued by the Florida Highway Patrol and the Northport Police Department and to 6 surrounding counties starting at 4:59 p.m. However, Charlotte County Sheriff's deputies were never aware of the BOLOs, which I have to ask, if her father, Sergeant Rick Goff, a 25-year veteran of Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, had called in and told them what was going on, and they assured them that they would help in any way they could, how can they say that they were unaware of the BOLOs?
You know, that's a situation I never even thought of.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the problem here. How can Charlotte County, unless dispatch had no idea of the BOLOs, but either way, police were never dispatched to the area where Jane Kolowski had reported the sighting of Michael King and his Camaro and Denise screaming in the back seat.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How do they not know? Although that's what they said after the fact, that they had no idea.
Right.
But I guess they were warned initially, unless they didn't give him all the help that he needed. I don't know. That's a tough one. Well, apparently, the Charlotte County Sheriff's Dispatch Center was understaffed, as they said. This, of course, is after the fact. And the deputies in the field would later testify that they were not aware of a green Camaro until 6:45 p.m., and only after Sergeant Goff had listened to his daughter's call. So I guess once he identified the fact that on the first 911 call where she had called in, that it was his daughter.
And the green Camaro. Okay.
Exactly. So in the green Camaro. So it wasn't until... That makes sense.
That makes a little more sense. It doesn't get them off the hook, but it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, so they weren't technically... They didn't know what they were looking for. They knew that she was missing, but they didn't know what she was looking for. So...
Okay.
So after he obviously contacted them, said, hey, I listened to the 911 call. My daughter's missing. This is what we got. Now, remember, Jane's call came in at 6:30. This is only 15 minutes prior to when they were made aware of the bolo.
Okay.
And although Kowalski's call lasted 9 minutes, and it was pretty detailed, it included cross streets, the Charlotte County Dispatch also failed to dispatch a car. So they didn't call in and say, hey, we need to get a car there quick. And furthermore, the dispatcher didn't even enter Kowalski's information into the CAD until 6:42. This is 12 minutes after the call had begun. So, and if you listen to the call, you can actually hear her say, she screams across the room, hey, what do you want me to do? That's in the 911 call. You can hear it. Well, do you want him to keep following her? Do you want me to stay, keep following?
Yeah. A dispatcher should know what to do, I think. And I don't know. I've never been a dispatcher. I don't know, but...
Well, I've listened to a lot of 911 calls. Tons of 911 calls. And the one thing that I notice is usually in 911 calls, when they come in situations like that, there's a sense of urgency. And like I said earlier with Denise's call, you can sense the fear in her voice, the calmness. She's trying to do everything to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Hey, this is where I'm at. This is my situation, without actually saying it. But you can tell she's terrified. And with this 911 call, Jane Kowalski, she's saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. But I don't sense that the 911 operator is showing that urgency. That, yes. Hey, we've got to know, hey, we've got this. Hey, this is it. There's none of that. It's, okay, well, do you want him to follow? I mean, do you want her to keep following? Should she do this? Are you secure? Are you safe? Really, there's no sense of urgency. That's where my frustration comes in with a 911 call at this point with Jane Kowalski's call.
Well, and apparently there were 3 other motorists who spoke to police later who witnessed Denise struggling in the back of King's car. Now, 2 of them asked ABC News not to identify them by name. One man, he said he saw Lee slamming on the windows with her palms really hard. It just looked like she was trying to break them out and shaking her head back violently back and forth. Both eyewitnesses said they had second thoughts about calling 911 because they didn't want to get involved in what they thought was a domestic dispute.
Folks, if you see this happening, get involved.
The first man admitted that he actually dialed 911 on his phone but didn't hit send. The final image of Lee stuck in the back seat of the car will haunt him every day. It made me sick to my stomach that I hadn't done what I should have done, made the phone call, he said.
So, hold on. Can you just kind of go over the details of this, just kind of give us a quick breakdown? We get to this point, and sometimes we get a little far off, and just kind of a recap, if you don't mind.
So, Denise Amber Lee was abducted from her home by a man named Michael King sometime between 2 and 3 p.m. on January 17th of 2008. Her husband, Nate, gets home from work a little after 3 p.m. and discovers his wife missing and his 2 young sons are home alone. He calls 911 at 3:29 p.m. and reports Denise missing. Now, Denise's father, a deputy with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, calls on his own department for help. Even though the crime occurred in Sarasota County, he called his own department, which was Charlotte County.
Which makes sense.
2 more 911 calls come into Sarasota County, one from Denise herself and another from Michael King's cousin.
Well, a 4th call came into 911 from Jane Kowalski, which was routed to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, who claimed they knew nothing about what was going on, even though Denise's father worked for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, and he had notified them, even had the deputies in the office helping in the search.
The following day, Jane saw the news and realized she had witnessed the abduction of Denise Lee rather than that of a child.
But she was young and small, so I can understand where Jane was coming from on this.
When she called the Northport Police Department to explain who she was and that she had made the 911 call, it became apparent that the call had not been forwarded to the correct authorities. In fact, it took 2 more days of Jane calling back before investigators in Northport were able to track down her 911 call.
And that is one of the most frustrating things I think that 911 has been faced with, is certain situations like this.
Right.
Where, and it's one of those, you can't blame 911 everywhere. You know, it's one particular person, one particular department. It makes it really tough. So there was, however, a final call that was placed to 911 by Harold Muxlow. Now, remember, he's the father of Sabrina Muxlow, who had called earlier, who he is the cousin of Michael King. Now, this call comes in at 6:50 p.m. Now, he was kind of vague in his account and attempted to hide his identity, but later investigations revealed who he was, that he was indeed the caller. And he said, I am not sure exactly what the emergency is, but then he explained how he felt that someone had been taken. Quote, it didn't look like she wanted to be there, he said. He confirmed that his cousin had borrowed a gas can, a shovel, and a flashlight. And he was told that these were to be used to fix a broken mower that was stuck in a ditch. So he's got a lawnmower stuck in a ditch. He's coming to buy it. Well, that doesn't explain the fact that a woman got out of the car. During the call, Muxlow said he had seen a woman in the car struggling with King. The woman got out of the car, as we talked about earlier, and at one point shouted, call the cops, to which King replied, don't worry about it, as he pushed her back into the vehicle and drove off. And this is where me and Lauren were like, what?
What? At 6:42 p.m., they showed up at Michael King's home and realized that he'd already been there and gone.
So they actually went to his house?
Yes, when they figured out who he was,
okay,
they went to his house, and they saw that he had already been there and gone. The police found a wadded-up ball of duct tape with long strands of hair stuck to it, a black hair tie on a Winnie the Pooh blanket on the floor. The house was nearly empty with no bed, furniture, or appliances, and there were apparent signs that someone had been held there.
Now, do we know if her father went to this place? I don't think her father went.
No, I don't think her father went.
Because this was Sarasota County.
Yes.
Okay. It gets confusing. Charlotte County was where Jane Kowalski's call came in.
Right.
Which is where Denise's father is a deputy.
Right.
But Michael King and Denise Lee live in Sarasota
County, yes.
So get a map. Just Google up a map and that'll help you clarify. Okay, so we're going to fast forward to 9:15 in the evening. This is roughly 6 hours after Denise was first reported missing. Now, Florida Highway Patrol Officer Eddie Pope pulled King's Camaro over as King tried to enter I-75 from Toledo Blade. And this is the area where, if you remember in the 911 call, where he had turned off, correct? Yep. Now, obviously, Denise was not in the car. So when he stepped out of his car, King was soaking wet from the waist down. So Pope noticed he was soaking wet from the waist down. In his pocket, he found a cell phone with the battery removed. And I'm assuming that this is going to be the phone that Denise was using to call 911 earlier. The battery was removed, obviously to kill the power in case there's any tracking or pings or anything like that. Now, Officer Pope at that time saw there was a muddy shovel laying inside the car. So now you can just imagine that you're a police officer. Obviously, you've probably got some experience. He's a highway patrol officer. And you see a man whose car has been on a bolo. You've got a guy that you recognize from the bolo. You get him out of the car, and you recognize that he has wet pants and there's a muddy shovel. And you know that this guy was part of a kidnapping. So you instantly start thinking the worst. This isn't good. You know, like, I've seen this before. This is not good.
But of course, Michael King had an excuse.
Imagine that. Shitbags usually do.
He told his cousin Harold, who authorities allowed to visit him in the interrogation room, that both he and Denise had been kidnapped. He said he'd been blindfolded and didn't know where his kidnappers had left Denise. He led police to an area not far from his house as a possible area where the abduction had taken place, or where they had been taken, but they came up with no evidence there. Now, obviously, investigators did not believe his story, so they went ahead and they charged Michael King with kidnapping.
Now, picture this for a minute. They allowed Harold to go in and talk to him, and he's trying to explain to Harold how he was kidnapped with this woman. Well, I know I was at your house earlier, and I got a flashlight and a gas can and a shovel, and you saw her tied up in the back of my car, and I shoved her in the car, so don't worry about it. We were both kidnapped.
Right.
How stupid.
But he doesn't seem to be the brightest crayon in the box.
Well, I understand. Well, you know what? I guess maybe he was smart in the aspect of that he realized he was in an interrogation room and that he was probably being recorded. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that that's probably the case. He probably thought, well, I'm going to tell this story to Harold, and that way, Harold will say, hey, yeah, that's what he said. And then that way, if it's being recorded, this is what the officers are going to hear is me tell this other BS story, which, like Lauren said, investigators didn't buy it. So I guess that brings us to Denise.
Where is Denise?
Where's Denise? So now, for 2 days, they had hundreds of volunteers who turned out to search for her. And that always, I always like to hear that, because that when you get the community involved and people come out and they help, it takes some of it. It's kind of a relief to law enforcement because you're being helpful, because obviously the more eyes, the better. And sadly, on day 2, an individual that was involved in the search, now she noticed an area of land near Plantation Boulevard in Northport where the earth had been disturbed. Now, in this vicinity of this area that had been sort of disturbed, as she describes it, were 2 small piles of sand that were out of place. This is not normal for the terrain that was there. In those 2 piles of sand, they did see that there was blood. Now, forensics teams commenced the excavation of this particular area, and on the morning of January 19th, the team removed this little piles of sand and noticed scalp marks, which were consistent with the round nose of a shovel digging straight down into the earth. So obviously they're realizing that this is an area where they were digging. And now, at the depth of 3 feet and 1 inch, the team discovered the nude body of Denise Lee, and she was lying on her side in a fetal position. And this was half a mile from where King had been arrested. So this is literally a half a mile from where Officer Pope had stopped him and pulled him over, brought him out of the car, and arrested him. And the officers and the people at the site, when they pulled her body out, they realized that she had been shot in the head. A couple days after the body of Denise was recovered, a single 9mm shell casing was found in the grass near the gravesite, but they never found the projectile, so they didn't find the actual bullet. Now, a couple hundred yards away from the gravesite, a crime scene technician recovered a pair of boxer shorts. Now, these were owned by Nathan Lee, but they were often worn by Denise, and a shirt belonging to Denise Lee. So, obviously, she was wearing her husband's boxers that day. She had on a shirt of hers.
Loungewear.
Yeah.
But Denise, the daughter of a police detective, was smart. Apparently, realizing she may not make it out of the situation alive, she left evidence in the back of King's car. When they searched the car, they found locks of blonde hair and a ring. It was the heart ring that her husband Nate had given her in high school.
It's a little cheap $40 ring that she always wore.
See, now that is smart, and that's something that I always think, I don't always think of it, but I think of this often. If anything were to ever happen to me, I mean, probably just because we do what we do with the true crime podcast, and we watch so many episodes of Forensic Files.
So many episodes.
But I mean, like, if I was ever in a situation like that or attacked, I've already thought about scratching the shit out of him or her and making sure to get skin cells underneath my nails, ripping out my hair and leaving it in places. Or, like, even if you're in a car or something, one thing you can do is eat fibers. Grab carpet fibers and just swallow them, because they will find that in your stomach
on
seen autopsy.
That on a Forensic Files, where a girl was thrown in the back of a van and they found orange fibers in her stomach.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things you can do if you're ever in a situation that you think you may not make it out alive. At least there's things you can do that will help the investigators find your killer.
Well, in this situation, though, she was doing
everything right.
Everything that you can possibly do to say,
she
okay,
was.
I've called 911, I'm giving you the information, I'm leaving some evidence here, so that way if you ever find this car, you know it was me. I mean, she was leaving basically a breadcrumb trail. I mean, Hansel and Gretel could have found their way back to this. Except, and that's what brings us to the big question here.
Is how did this even happen?
Exactly.
And we still don't know. As I mentioned earlier, there was never any connection between Denise Lee and Michael King. It appears as if this crime was truly random, unless he had been stalking her, or he had seen her before, or he somehow knew that she was home alone.
I'm going to say that they realized that he lived 4 miles away from her. Mm-hmm. Or was that where the cousin lived? No, he lived 4 miles away from her. Right?
I don't know, actually.
Either way, he had been in the vicinity of her home. I'm assuming that he probably drove by one day. She was out in the yard with the kids, and he had to have seen her. If she's inside the kids were in bed, the windows were open, I can't, and that's where I have trouble trying to, he had to have known that she was there. He had to have known that she was going to be home alone. And most abductors are not going to try to kidnap someone who has a man at home.
Right.
And
unless you're the Golden State Killer.
Well, that's a whole different dickhead right there. But this guy here, obviously, he abducted her, so he had to have drove by one day. Maybe he's seen her and stalked her. Maybe they ran into each other at the grocery store. He followed her home. There's a lot of different questions that are not answered in that aspect of how he knew to be there, how he knew that the husband was not going to be home. And I guess my question, too, is also the windows.
Why were the windows closed? I don't know.
Did she run around and close the windows? Because she had told her husband earlier that they were open. Did he close the windows? Did she close the window? So there's a lot of things a lot of questions that are unanswered, none that are really relevant to the case, other than the fact that we don't know how he knew her.
Yeah. I don't think we'll really ever know.
No, but let's go ahead. Let's take a second here and look at who this guy Michael King was, or is. He's not dead just yet. So at the time of the murder, he was 36 years old, and he was a plumber by trade, but had stopped showing up for work 3 months earlier for whatever reason we don't know. Now, he had first moved here to Florida, it was, I guess, in 2002, following a bitter divorce from a woman in Michigan. Here's the part that gets me the most. He had no criminal record. So he had no criminal record, but there were, I guess, a pattern of disturbing behavior. So there were some allegations. Patty Paul, she's a lady who owns a beauty salon in Venice, says, it's Venice, Florida, not Venice, Italy, folks, says King was a regular, so he would come in there, and she told Dateline that King had shown up once at the salon with a girl he claimed to be 15 years old that he'd met in Tennessee off the internet. And I guess everyone got real eerily uncomfortable when he started kissing and making out with her. It's a 15-year-old.
Why would you even admit that? You would say, why would you, even if she was 15, why would you take her to the hair salon and tell everyone she was 15? You could have just said she was 18.
Well, because this guy obviously isn't right.
Yeah, he's not right. That's for sure.
Definitely not right. Well, there are also reports that King had exposed himself to a woman while on the job, I guess being a plumber, and there was even one allegation of rape. But none of these incidents were actually reported to the police. And you know that when you don't report them to the police, they don't get documented. Yeah. So therefore, it doesn't help out later on. So now the detectives did kind of sort of put together sort of a time frame or sort of an...
What happened to Denise?
What happened to Denise? A kind of a time frame or whatever, and sort of an outline, if you will, of what happened. Now, they state that King had gone to Denise's house and held her at gunpoint, made her leave her children there and get into the car. He took her to his home and raped her. So he takes her home. That's where they're out alleging that he raped her. And then that's when he took her to the cousin's house. So the cousin had seen them pull in the car. He was getting the shovel and the gas, the flashlight, all of that, blah, 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 after the rape had occurred. Now, after he learned she had called 911, he took her to the remote area off Toledo Blade Boulevard and shot her. That's obviously where she was found. And later, investigators found Denise's remains in the shallow grave that we talked about earlier off Toledo Blade Boulevard. And sadly, this is right where Jane Kowalski in the 911 call earlier said that she had saw him turn.
Right.
And Jane, here's the frustrating part. Had Jane's call been handled correctly, the deputy could have been sent to the scene and she might have been saved because she was killed at the graveside. He was going to take her there to kill her and dispose of her. Mm-hmm. And had someone listened to Jane and handled it correctly, the deputy might have been dispatched and could have stopped this. Maybe he would have pulled up and gotten the situation handled.
So going back to Jane's 911 call, as it was explained in the Dateline episode, in an internal investigation, the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office found that the operator had made the connection between the 911 call and the search for Denise Lee. The operator's job was to give the information to police dispatchers, the ones who are talking to the deputies on their radios out in the field. But instead of entering the tip into the computer database during the call, the operator shouted it across the aisle. And the dispatchers who said they heard her never actually sent the tip out. In the chaos of that night, they simply forgot.
Shit.
John Davenport, the sheriff of Charlotte County, suddenly found himself confronting attacks on his department's competence. It didn't help the sheriff's case that at the time the 911 call came in, there were deputies from his office stationed on the very road Jane was driving along.
Are you serious?
My mind is like blowing right now.
Are you serious? There was actually somebody stationed
there? Was deputies stationed on US 41 where Jane was driving. One deputy even said in a sworn statement that he was parked on the side of Toledo Blade Road at 6:35 p.m. that night, the very road that King turned onto when Jane lost him.
No shit.
Denise and her captor probably drove right by him.
Shit.
So, Ken always tries to look for something good that comes out of every bad situation, no matter how horrible it is.
It's true.
And in this case, I believe it's the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. Due to Jane Kowalski's mishandled 911 call, more research revealed several issues countrywide in the 911 system. So a nonprofit organization with the mission to promote and support public safety through uniform training, standardized protocols, defined measurable outcomes, and technological advances in the 911 system was established in June 2008 in Denise Lee's name. Her husband, father, and father-in-law continue to manage the foundation, along with many other notable community leaders from the region. On April 24, 2008, the Senate Bill CSSB 1694, concerning the Denise Amber Lee Act, which provides for voluntary training for 911 operatives, was passed unanimously by the Florida legislature. The Act's passage into law continues. House Bill CSHB 355 and Senate Bill CSSB 742 are being considered to present in Tallahassee to address the fact that 911 operatives in the state are not required to undertake mandatory training. Now, Lee's husband, Nathan Lee, and her father, Rick Goff, continue to lobby in Tallahassee to get Denise's law passed, which would recommend mandatory training and certification for all 911 dispatchers.
As it should be.
The trial of the state of Florida versus Michael L. King officially began on August 24th of 2009. The prosecution presented DNA and other forensics evidence, including hair and personal articles of Lee's, found around and within the Camaro, King's home, and the gravesite. Other evidence included King's change of clothing, duct tape, a shell casing, the shovel, and King's cell phone. After the car was towed to the Northport Police Department, a shovel with dirt caked on the underside was discovered in the back seat. Harold Muxlow identified the shovel as the one he had given King on the afternoon of January 17th. A palm print found on the outside of the driver's side window of the Camaro was identified as belonging to Denise Lee. DNA testing of the hair recovered from the outside of the Camaro matched the known profile of Denise Lee. Hair found in the back seat of the Camaro matched Denise's DNA, and a blanket located in the back seat tested positive for blood that matched Denise Lee. The blood found on the outside of the Camaro also matched the DNA profile of Denise Lee.
Shitload of evidence.
After a search warrant was obtained and a thorough search of King's home was conducted, upon entering the house, an evidence technician observed that there were a number of rectangular mirrors hanging on the walls side by side in the dining room. However, there was also one set of hooks on the wall that was not supporting a mirror. Upon entering the master bedroom, the technician noted that a yellow blanket covered the window. A Winnie the Pooh blanket, pillows, and a wad of duct tape with hair attached were on the floor. Directly across from the pillows and the blanket, a mirror identical to those hanging in the dining room was propped against the wall. In the kitchen, the technician observed an intact roll of duct tape on the bar. A garbage can in the pantry contained more duct tape with hair attached. The hairs that were attached to the duct tape in the garbage matched the known DNA profile of Denise Lee. Swabs taken from the end of the wadded up duct tape located in the master bedroom matched the DNA profile of Michael King. The Winnie the Pooh blanket found in the master bedroom tested positive for blood and semen. The semen on the blanket matched the known DNA profile of King, and Denise could not be excluded as a contributor of the blood. The boxer shorts found at the grave site tested positive for sperm cells, and those cells matched the DNA profile of Michael King.
So this guy is not trying to cover his tracks at all.
Apparently not. During the autopsy, 2 pieces of duct tape were removed from Denise's hair. The medical examiner found bruises on her wrists, and due to their same general location on each wrist, concluded that they could have been caused by ligatures and were consistent with defensive injuries. The medical examiner noted that Lee had vaginal bruising and anal tearing, both of which were caused by insertion trauma. The medical examiner concluded from the condition of the injuries that they were inflicted pre-mortem and were non-consensual. Semen recovered from Lee's vagina matched the DNA profile of King.
The prosecution also called eyewitnesses, including Jane Kowalski and King's cousin. The defense attempted to provide a reasonable doubt by bringing up the jury's attention of evidence tampering, contamination, and by suggesting that one of King's friends had committed the crime, which that to me made no sense at all. Why?
No, I don't even know where they would come up with that.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much evidence. I mean, the apartment, his apartment or house, whatever, was just a treasure trove of everything you need to convict someone. Now, the judge obviously did not approve of the latter defense. They didn't deal with this, it was his friend's crap.
Right.
Now, the defense rested without calling any witnesses. Imagine that. So you're defending this guy and you say, yeah, we don't really have any witnesses. We're pretty much guilty. They knew. The attorneys knew. And on August 28th of 2009, after deliberating for only 2 hours and 5 minutes, the jury found King guilty of kidnapping with intent to commit a felony, sexual battery, and first-degree murder. And on September 4th, 2009, at 2:45 p.m., the jury handed down the recommended sentence of death in a unanimous 12-0 vote.
On December 4th of 2009, Circuit Judge Dino Economiou sat behind the bench and read his written ruling, about 45 pages that detailed how he weighed all the aggravating and mitigating factors that went into his decision. In the end, Judge Economiou declared that the aggravating factors that support a death sentence outweighed the mitigating factors that could have led to a sentence of life in prison. The judge considered King's low IQ, a past brain injury while sledding as a child, and the fact that he was depressed due to a relationship breakup and a foreclosure on his home. But the judge ultimately placed more weight on the heinous, premeditated nature of the crime, that Lee was kidnapped, that she was murdered during the course of other felonies, including rape. He confirmed and delivered his sentence at 2:45 p.m.
Well, as they all do, in 2012, Michael King tried to appeal his conviction and death sentence. And at the time, King's attorneys argued that the former plumber did not get a fair trial, and the brain injuries he suffered as a child meant he should not get the death penalty. And the Florida Supreme Court upheld the murder conviction and the death sentence, calling his abduction and killing of Denise Lee unquestionably cold and cruel. So that pretty much sums it up for Michael King. Obviously, he's going to be on death row for however long it takes to finally put someone to death in the state of Florida. Well, after all this kind of settled down, the family of Denise Amber Lee did file a wrongful death lawsuit against Charlotte County. And according to a Facebook post from the Northport Sun on August 17th of 2012. There was I'll just read here. Family members of the murder victim of Denise Amber Lee will receive a portion of $1.25 million from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office in a wrongful death settlement, and this is according to all the court documents. According to the settlement finalized this week, I'm not going to give you all that. It gives a breakdown of how much the family gets and the kids, and it's basically just a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed against Charlotte County, where I believe currently her father still is a sheriff's deputy, although he did receive portion of the settlement.
Right.
And the kids got a portion, and it's a mess, and it's not the direction you want to go. I can understand.
Something should have been done, because that was really like a massive fuck up. Yeah,
and I can understand it, and I did read some of the transcripts of the 911 operators when they were put on the stand. And again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier or what you mentioned earlier about the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. There's no training. So it's like everything's chaotic. What do you do in this situation? And just focus on your job and do that. Do your job as you would do it, whether it be, hey, I'm calling in because there's a car accident. It looks like somebody's hurt. Police, fire, and medical. Please, we need them all. Hey, there's a girl in a car next to me. It looks like she's being kidnapped. Send a deputy.
If you see something, say something.
Exactly. And if you're a 911 operator, if someone calls you in and tells you they see something, call the police. And there was a scenario, I'm not going to get into details, where we actually called the police, and the police came and they stopped the guy and they checked him out, and we told him, oh, well, that makes sense now. We're sorry. Didn't mean to waste your time. And the deputy said, no, please. Anytime you see something like this or anything this occurs, call us, because the one time you don't call is going to be the time you should have.
Right.
And there's a situation where if you're a 911 dispatcher, the one time you don't do something is when something happens.
Right.
So
Murphy's
regardless,
Law.
Exactly. So regardless of what it is, but I kind of feel bad for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office in the aspect that they had this occur. And obviously, they're the ones that take a hit for it. The taxpayers and all that good stuff take a hit from the sheriff's office. But I understand totally, 100%, where the family's coming from. So that, like I said, that lawsuit was settled. And he's been on Dr. Phil. They've done Dateline.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of stuff about it. But one of the things that I find so bittersweet about this case is it's good that the children are so young in some aspect that they're not going to remember any of it, but that it's also heartbreaking because the kids are so young that there's so much of their mother they're not going to be able to live and experience, So I don't know, it's kind of heartbreaking in a way.
It is. The whole case, the whole thing is heartbreaking and scary and upsetting. It really just all of the above.
Yeah. So anyway. Well, I guess that's going to be it for the night. That's the case of Denise Amber Lee.
And again, if you'd like to support the show, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Paradise After Dark podcast.
You can also check out our Etsy store for some awesome Paradise After Dark gear.
Make sure to follow us on social media at Paradise After Dark podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and at Paradise Dark 239 on Twitter.
And you can email us at paradiseafterdarkpodcast@gmail.com.
Please make sure to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening and rate and review. This really helps us branch out and reach a wider audience.
We would appreciate, maybe 5 stars?
5 stars would be fabulous.
7 stars if they allow you, depending on your... No, it's only 5? Okay. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening
to Paradise After Dark.
Dark, dark, dark.